Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We will get started in about 2 minutes. We'll give a little bit more time for people to log in. So just hold on 1 second. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. So hello and welcome to San Diego SHRM's webinar, Getting to the Truth in an AOE/COE Claim. My name is Jenna Bailey with San Diego SHRM. Please note that the recertification credit information will be emailed out to the active participants after the webinar. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items to note. This webinar is being recorded. To avoid background noise, we are muting everyone's lines, but you can ask questions in the questions box on the GoToWebinar panel. If you don't see the panel, please expand it by hitting the orange arrow. The presenter and I will keep an eye on any comments or questions so that they can be addressed throughout the presentation. As you know, occasionally technical issues may arise, so if for whatever reason audio is lost, please let us know in the questions box immediately. This is a rare item that happens, but if it happens, please let us know, and it usually only takes a few seconds for it to resolve itself. Before I introduce today's speaker, I would like to invite you to attend San Diego SHRM's upcoming events. On February 20th, we have a breakfast program at Sony, the essential guide to hike to the top of the healthy workplace culture pyramid, presented by Patty Perez. We have 2 SHRM SCP courses offered this spring, online courses beginning February 11th, in-person courses which begins February 28th. Please visit our event calendar for details about each of them. And finally, we have a webinar on March 12th, Solving the Leave Management Puzzle, Challenges and Best Practices. Remember, these webinars are an easy way to earn recertification credit, and they are free for San Diego SHRM members. Without further ado, it is now my pleasure to introduce Gus Ortiz. Gus has over 25 years of working experience as a claims examiner, field investigator, vocational rehab counselor, consultant, and finally as an expert in Medicare compliance and legacy claim resolution. He and his BMA West team are renowned for their expertise and dedicated services to clients. He is co-author of the grassroots books, 8 Steps to a Winning Workers' Comp Program. The span of his knowledge and creativity is unique only to those with his experience level. Please welcome Gus.
Well, thanks a lot. Hello and welcome to today's session. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm Gus Ortiz. I'm president of BMA West. My team and I have been helping employers to reduce risk by evaluating and settling their workers' comp claims using our Medicare set-aside arrangement expertise and our medical cost projections. We also help employers by helping on the front end of claims in the investigation aspect when injuries do arise on the job. We also coach employers to create winning methods to create a better risk management program and workers' comp program on the job site. We've had the pleasure of working with private sector employers and public entities since 2006. We're just a small team of experts, but we have clients nationwide. So today we're going to be speaking about questionable injuries and AOE COE workers' comp claims and how to develop leverage that will enable you to pose a formidable defense. We'll also discuss methods you can use to minimize the emergence of these types of claims. So I definitely want to hear from you if you have questions. So if you feel free to write in, or if you have a specific scenario you want to discuss offline, feel free to contact me on the contact information at the end of the program, and I'd be happy to schedule a time to meet with you or set up a phone conference. So let's talk about the basics of questionable claims. What is AOE COE? Well, in workers' comp, AOE COE stands for arising out of employment and in the course of employment. An injury must have occurred as a result of employment and while the employee was in the process of performing his assigned job duties. In order for an injury to be compensable, it must meet this criteria. Now, when an injury does not fall clearly into this criteria, it's considered to be a questionable claim, and investigative steps must be taken to prove the validity or deniability of the claim. I ran this slideshow by my wife the other day. My wife, by the way, is a human resource veteran, and I ran the slideshow by her, at least when I was putting it together. And after I got through that AOE COE part, she says, "So why should I care?" Yes, after 30 years, I can take that kind of critique from her. But I guess she's right. Why should you care? Well, the claims process is an expensive process. It's not. With simple non-litigated medical indemnity claims, expenditures, cost upwards of $40,000. Okay, so but here's the catch: whatever you do in the beginning of a claim can directly affect the outcome and the expense of a claim. The lack of knowledge and solid evidence and a solid plan of action will definitely cost you many thousands of dollars in the long run. So the only way to go is a proactive approach, which can save you a considerable amount of money. You see, the insurance model is a strange thing. When you're buying insurance, the risk and insurance model is presented in the best possible light. The risk model presents lots of proactive measures to prevent injuries, but little information about how the claims model will protect you. That email's coming in. Ideally, the risk model is supposed to prevent injuries, and the claims model is supposed to be your safety net implemented when the risk model fails. But there are weaknesses in the claims model, and it becomes very evident when a questionable claim arises. To begin with, when a questionable claim is reported, the employer is already in a vulnerable position. Why? Well, because the California Labor Code places the burden of proof on the employer in any kind of workers' comp matter. And it's the employer's job to shift the leverage in the case to a point where your losses are minimized or you come out on top. The trouble with the claims model is that the cost of winning can be expensive. So, if there's money to be saved, it has to be on the front end of the claim. So a funny thing happened at work the other day. This is an actual scenario we worked on last year as part of our workers' comp on-site assistance service. We show up to a computer software developer company um, in Southern California uh, to talk about a 34-year-old software developer who came into work on a Monday, sat down at his cubicle and started working. About an hour later, he reported to his supervisor tingling and numbness in his hands and difficulty in gripping objects. The employer sent the injured worker to the industrial clinic where he was diagnosed with carpal tunnel syndrome. The employer reported the claim to the third-party administrator as he's required to, and the third-party administrator delayed the claim and referred it to an investigator who contacted the employer about 15 days later to schedule an investigation. So what makes this a questionable claim in the eyes of the employer? Well, first of all, it's a Monday morning injury report. Those are always suspect. You never know what folks are doing on the weekend. So, it's always a red flag. Second of all, there was never a previous complaint of injury. And then also there was question as to the injured worker's outside activities. But more importantly, I think the part that really got to me was that the symptoms seemed to be much more advanced than an initial complaint of carpal tunnel. And the employer had to suspect, was suspect that the injured worker had a second job somewhere. So once the initial commotion of a workplace injury has worn off, we need to look at some risk management concerns that need to be addressed with risk managers and your claims team there at the third-party administrator or insurance company. And in this case, these are some of the things that popped up immediately. First thing, it took 10 days for the third-party administrator to get an investigator out to the employer site. In workers' comp claims, everything is time sensitive. You have delay letters that go out that need responding to in 60 to 90 days, and then denial letters that have to follow up subsequent to that. There are benefits to be paid if no resolution to the investigation has been found as well. So that's part of it. The other thing was that the employee was not compelled to mention initial and ongoing symptoms prior to reporting the injury. I point that out simply because it seemed as if, at least from my perspective, that he was reluctant to do so. If he was feeling injury or pain or discomfort previous to his report, it's likely that he did not feel compelled to report it, or felt reluctant or concerned about reporting it. To me, that speaks greatly of what the work environment might be like, and that should be concern for human resources and risk management personnel. There was also no knowledge of outside activities. There was also concern that the immediate supervisor had no knowledge of what his employee did on the weekends, or anything about him personally, or any challenges he was having on the job. And finally, the employer did not send a job description along with the injured worker to the doctor. So those are just some of the things that popped up to us as concerning. Unwitnessed injuries place the employer in the unenviable position of proving credibility or deniability of the claim. Either way, if the employer were to deny the claim, the employee still has the opportunity to prove the viability. The employee still has the opportunity to prove the viability of his claim through the use of medical legal examinations. So even after you've denied a claim in beautiful, wonderful, sunny California, an injured worker, or a claimant, as they call it in insurance, can still pursue the claim even if it's been denied. again, the burden of proof remains on the employer. The employer or the claims examiner will have to devise a strategy to disprove the claim. However, another challenge emerges, and that's the challenge that the claims examiner may not have the expertise to devise anything other than the usual and customary method of defending a claim. Unwitnessed injuries or AOE COE claims can be reported in multiple fashions. They can come in on the actual date of injury. They can come in the form of an application for adjudication of claim, which means that he's represented by an attorney. Or it could be reported up to 1 year from the date of injury or the employee's last day worked. And it could come in post-termination as well. In California, the workers' comp system is a no-fault system, and the burden of proof lies on the employer. So, what to do? So it's basically a bad scenario. One of the most challenging scenarios that arises when an employer has an unwitnessed injury on their hands is that there's a lack of consistent documentation. Above all else, the lack of documentation and the unwitnessed injury itself may be a symptom of something else that's going on in the workplace. A lack of documentation can mean a lack of witnesses and evidence in the case, which can mean the likelihood of you losing on this is pretty high. But by creating a culture of accountability, frontline supervisors and their managers, they make a concerted effort to account for the happenings in the workplace. They also have a greater insight into the employee's activities. The only way to support a successful defense or corroborate a credible injury is through the practice of documentation, not just by human resources, but also by frontline supervisors and department managers. Other ways of gaining consistent knowledge of employee activity include the use of video cameras and monitoring of workplace computers. These activities will create a culture of accountability, letting employees and supervisors know that they're responsible for knowing what's going on in the workplace. Okay. So, in the particular scenario that we talked about there, we began with what did we need to know? What did we want to know here? We wanted to find out from the employee, when did he first start feeling symptoms? When did he make his supervisor aware of those symptoms? How many hours per day was he working at a keyboard? And whether he had concurrent employment elsewhere. And also important was, had there been any modifications to the workstation, or were there any requests for modifications to the workstation? And as far as what we want to know from supervisors and coworkers is, when did they first start hearing of complaints, and what does this guy do outside of work? Well, when do you have to know this? You need to know this stuff as soon as possible. Like, as I mentioned before, in this particular case, it took the insurance third-party administrator about 10 days to get an investigator out to the job site to do an investigation. The documentation was pretty scarce. The knowledge of what this guy did was pretty scarce as well. So things weren't necessarily going the way they were supposed to go. But it's a great learning opportunity. You want this information, you want to find out as soon as possible what's going on in the claim. Workers' comp claims are time sensitive. If the claim is a continuous trauma, in order to determine your exposure, you have to know the legal date of injury. And all the while this investigation is going on, the clock is ticking. Denial letters have gone out, and in California, delay letters have gone out. And in California, if you do not accept or deny a claim within that certain period of time, then the claim is deemed acceptable and benefits must be paid. It's also important to establish in continuous trauma and repetitive injury claims when your date of knowledge was. So there are proactive things that human resources can do to affect change. And these are just a few. But also consider cultivating a culture of advocacy in the workplace. While questionable injuries may still occur, a genuine effort to reassure the employee that your interest is in seeing them return to work, well, that goes a long way. And when claims do occur, avoid the typical insurance company adversarial approach and focus more on a return to work process. Consider preventative measures that would advocate for the employee should he become injured, such as preventative wellness activities, regular Monday morning coaching sessions, and that sort of thing. Coaching supervisors to become aware and accountable is a big thing. To learn more about employees under their supervision and to religiously document incidents that occur in the workplace. Schedule, as I stated, Monday morning training sessions, coaching sessions, and talk with employees openly about workers' compensation. They can't be left to feel that workers' compensation is a taboo thing to talk about at work. When injuries do occur, however, begin a human resources level investigation when these cases are unwitnessed, and consider putting video cameras and computer monitoring systems in place. And some employers actually get affirmations of non-injury from their employees every month. So those are just some of the things that can help you along in these types of cases. So in our investigation, we confirmed that basically, yes, there was a Monday morning report of injury. These are the red flags. There was no previous complaint of injury and no witnesses or no knowledge of injury. And the question was whether the employee had outside activities. Was he heavily into gaming or had a second job? And as I stated before, the symptoms that he was displaying seemed a bit more advanced. So to me, that rang of a pre-existing injury, or maybe, he's overworking himself, putting in way too many hours than what's required at work. The employer suspected that there was a second job because the employee was always tardy and always looked tired. So the overall outcome was positive, though. The employee eventually did return to work. He did end up having a second job doing data entry for a bank in the night shift, and was too timid to report the claim to his supervisor because he was fearing repercussions for having a second job. He did require surgery, however, and the evidence, however, allowed for the joinder of a co-defendant who reimbursed 50% of the workers' comp medical costs. On the negative side, the claim costs were over $150,000 before reimbursement from co-defendant. It took close to a year for things to begin to actually turn around in this claim, and it was likely due to the consistency and lengthy investigation and medical legal activity that went on. But that's the way claims models work, unless the employer affects change in their program. Even suspect claims filed by disgruntled employees can be moved with greater expediency to a winning resolution if the plan of action is proactive and not lackadaisical, as is customary in the insurance world. Claims need not travel the years-long path to settlement as is normally done. Okay, they can be mediated at quite an early stage in the game. However, the employer has to set the tone, and the employer basically has to set up the rules with their third-party administrator or insurance carrier as to how they want their program to operate. So here's another case I thought might interest you. that's a saying I saw. I can't remember where I saw this saying. Don't trust everything you see, because even salt looks like sugar. In this particular instance, we had a 39-year-old distribution employee suffering pre-existing bipolar illness and multiple sclerosis. There came a time when that employee failed to show up to work for 3 days straight. On the fourth day, called in to claim a work-related stress injury. There had been no complaint of stress to her manager or coworkers but there were rumors of a possible relationship between the employee and the manager. The employer sent the employee to a clinic who referred her to a psychologist for an evaluation, and the employer filled out a claim form and the first report of injury, and the claim was delayed while an investigation was requested. Personally, I was impressed on this case with the investigation that the Human Resources Department did in this. I thought they did a great job. So what did we want to know? We wanted to know and confirm the pre-existing conditions. Of concern to me was what kind of prescriptions she was taking, and what other diagnosis she was so what other diagnosis she had other than the multiple sclerosis. And multiple sclerosis, by the way, is not a disease in and of itself as much as it is a catalyst for a multiple range of other illnesses that stem from it. So we wanted to find out exactly what was going on and if things were much more advanced than what the employer believed they were. Also wanted to confirm that romantic relationship with a manager, and to see if employee statements all corroborated the employee's behavior. We wanted to assess the workplace to see if the site was a hostile environment, and we wanted to find out why the employee didn't return to work for those 3 days. So, Human Resources began an on-site investigation of their own, as the investigator had still not been assigned by the insurance carrier. So it was a prime time for an investigation to take place as the employee was off work. So the HR department surveyed the employee department and coworkers and nearby managers in what they called an environmental assessment, and were surprised by the responses. They were alarmed that all the employees had termed the workplace environment as hostile, and even more surprised when they found that the employee was the root cause of that. There were written statements from employees all describing the injured worker as a bully, of using profanity consistently in the department, insubordination, especially over the last 60 days, and especially with her manager. There was also, corroboration that there was some type of romantic relationship with her manager. Really surprising stuff. It's like a soap opera, I guess, Well, here's in that environmental assessment, it turned out that the employees had failed to report the hostile environment, fearing reprisal from the manager. And not so much because the manager was an ogre or anything like that, but more so because they felt that the employee had considerable leverage over them due to her relationship with that manager. Human Resources was curious to the response, and they learned that the claimant was in fact having a romantic relationship. And that was concerning on many, many levels. Of great concern to them as well was the consistent use of profanity in the department. To them and to me, it kind of symbolized a degradation of morale in the workplace. So something was going on. The employees also believed that the injured worker became increasingly ill, and as a result became gradually more aggressive. Turns out that 20 days later, after the initial report of injury, investigators from the insurance company did arrive and took a statement from the injured worker corroborating all the other employee statements. So in this particular case, the claim was denied. The employee was at work during the stressful period of time of her illness, but her illness was pre-existing and did not arise out of employment. So therefore, you had a denied claim. The claimant, the Human Resources Department was very interested in seeing this person get the proper attention that she needed, so they referred her to employee assistance, which led her to see other doctors and mental health professionals to help her regain control and control over her demeanor. And that was a very positive step that Human Resources took, a very proactive step that probably diffused a really ugly claim. Human Resources was also concerned that the work environment was out of control. The software development company environment, I guess, is a very, very stressful and competitive environment. And it looks like there was some kind of degradation of morale there. So they began a series of training sessions on professional etiquette in the workplace. They began occasional talks about workers' comp claims, and also provided managers and supervisors with training on accountability and how to be better leaders. So this is the truth about unwitnessed AOE COE injury claims that litigate. Okay, if one of these unwitnessed injuries, unfortunately, loses control, we'll just put it that way, or if it is not handled properly by the insurance examiner, or if there's not proper investigation to it, eventually it does end up litigating according to statistics. And usually these claims are related to a disgruntled employee who's merely retaliating for unfair workplace practices in their eyes. They feel that they've been treated unjustly as well. And it usually, our research showed that it did actually take carriers and third-party administrators up to 20 days to fully investigate claims like this. The claims administrators also took and continue to take a very adversarial but yet a passive approach to claims handling when it comes to these types of claims, and that it takes about 3 to 5 years for these claims to come to settlement. And when they do settle, it's usually for about $50,000 to $70,000 after the employee is sent to an agreed medical examiner. Here's the thing about all that I just shared with you. Employees feeling that they're being treated unjustly at work and retaliating with workers' comp claims, it's kind of a last desperation effort by the employee to get back at an employer. If employees get to that point, you do have a serious workers' comp claim issue on your hands, but more so, it's an opportunity to take a look at your work comp program, your risk management program, and the overall morale and and environment there at the workplace. You can always kind of see things percolating there when things are starting to get heated. And yes, of great concern to you should be the fact that it takes insurance carriers or third-party administrators up to 20 days to fully investigate, to get an investigator out to your site to fully investigate a claim. Workers' comp claims are time sensitive. You've got I believe, a 60 or 90-day delay period while you investigate. And if you miss that delay period, then you don't have an opportunity to deny the claim, and you've automatically accepted a claim that you probably don't want to. So that's a concern, and I always recommend to human resources departments and risk managers to take a proactive approach as soon as something happens and begin gathering information, documentation from supervisors and department managers, gather it all up, and start putting together an on-site HR level investigation that will allow the insurance carrier ample time to deny or accept the claim if it's going to be acceptable. And here's the thing about the insurance claims models. As I mentioned before, risk when you're out buying insurance for the company, I mean, you get the whole dog and pony show, and risk managers are there to tell you everything that they're going to do to help prevent injuries. But they very rarely talk to you about the claims program. Now, claims examiners are a very interesting breed of people. Having been one myself, it takes a very interesting character to be able to do this kind of work, to take 150 to 200 personal problems and medical injuries of complete strangers and their financial problems and work on them daily. Is a very challenging and sometimes thankless job. So a lot of times these folks are not necessarily up to being proactive. They will very easily do their 5-point telephone contacts on an initial claim and then send a delay letter out and then diary the claim until that delay letters come and due. And in that period of time, they go to work on other cases. So it's very possible that when these cases arise, that you may not be at the top of the list of priorities. So you need to take that into account, and you need to consider, devising a culture of accountability in the workplace, merely to protect yourself and to, protect your workers' comp program. Definite proactive approach should be to get with the third-party administrator, the examiner, the manager of the department, the insurance broker, and say, I want to devise a proactive approach to my claims, and then have a decent plan devised. Those brokers are really ingenious fellows, and they can come up with all kinds of stuff to help you out. And if not, feel free to give us a call and be happy to put together a plan for you to move forward in your claims handling. Here's the last thing that concerns me about unwitnessed AOE COE injuries that litigate, and that is that they do settle for about $50,000 to $70,000 once the case is done with. But if you're adamant that there was no injury in the claim, that occurred on the job site, and that this injury is not yours, then by all means do not agree to send the case to an agreed medical examiner. By merely doing so, you're agreeing to adhere to the opinion of that doctor, who is basically going to find the middle point between the attorney's desire to settle and the insurance company's desire to settle, and then that'll be that. You will end up paying between $50,000 to $70,000 in my experience. So anyways, well, we talked about creating a culture of accountability. Hiring the right people to take responsibility is important. You need great material to build your organization. And you also need to set clear, measurable goals and expectations of your frontline supervisors and department managers. And then measure and review the results when things do occur, and definitely address deficiencies. Make sure that employees feel accountable for what's happening in the workplace too. I know this may not be at the top of everybody's priority list, but it is important, and taking this proactive approach will definitely save you thousands of dollars in the long run. And this is just more about taking accountability. My favorite thing is that proactive communication with team members, keep people informed and help to create an open avenue of communication, which reduces litigated injuries. And also taking responsibility for results and happenings on site builds a level of trust, and trust is a foundation for a high-performing team. The lack of accountability leads to a snowball of small troubles, which lead to bigger troubles, and then a decay of ethics and morale in the workplace. And next thing you know, you're growing unwitnessed injuries and AOE COE injuries left and right. And by that time, it's going to be pretty dire circumstances. Um, so here you go. These are the keys, in my opinion, to a workplace free of questionable claims. Communicate openly about workers' comp as you would any other benefit. Employees need to know the process, and there will be less confusion. There'll be less fear by the employee of actually filing a claim. Develop a culture of accountability, which we talked about. Communicate with your carrier or third-party administrator, and place expectations on the claims department and even the broker. Okay, make him accountable as well for the outcomes. If you're putting in your 100% effort, they should be doing the same. Uh, Human resources can develop a proactive protocol to address questionable claims and develop an employer level investigation of their own. That can carry a lot of weight and can help move the claim in the right direction. And finally, get advice on handling claims should they develop. Feel free to give us a call anytime. We'd be happy to come out to talk with you or phone conference with you, whatever it takes to help you move forward. And that's pretty much it. It's been a real pleasure sharing this information with you. I'm really excited to be able to share ideas with your esteemed group. Please, by all means, feel free to ask questions if you like, or you're also welcome to contact me at that telephone number or email address with any specific case scenarios that you'd like to discuss. And other than that, thanks for tuning in. I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Gus, for speaking to our group today.
You're welcome.
We hope you all found the webinar to be helpful and informative. Recertification credits will be emailed out shortly. If you ever have questions, please reach out to us at San Diego SHRM. We're here as your resource, and thank you for being a part of San Diego SHRM's community. We hope to see you all at the February 20th breakfast program at Sony. Have a great rest of your day.